welcome to today's episode of the Business Meets Fitness podcast with your hosts, Lauren Tickner and James Smith. And today we are essentially going to be doing a roundup of the very first month of MAS. Well, it's not the very first month of MAS. However, it's the very first month that James and I have been doing our weekly reviews of MAS. Now, we're really sorry for missing last week. One thing, we just got caught up with a few things. So again, we're sorry about that. Sometimes life gets in the way, but now we're going to be batching these episodes to make sure that we have all the content for you. So make sure that you've hit subscribe because it's just going to keep getting better and better.
And by the way, if you haven't subscribed to MAS already and you're serious about either your career in the fitness industry or just the evidence-based fitness world and you're wanting to learn more and more and more, then make sure to at least try it for a month. So I've left a link in the show notes for this podcast so that you can try it for 1 month or even just keep up your subscription, because if you buy it with the annual subscription, then you basically get a huge discount. So I could not recommend that more, but at least try it for 1 month because I know that is gonna absolutely change the game for you, even on top of all these podcast episodes as well.
We thought it would be really interesting to talk about whether evidence and science and studies and all that makes us train less and eat worse. And basically, we just thought it would be a really, really interesting topic. So James, do you just want to go ahead and, maybe we should start with training because it would make sense to make the first half of this podcast be speaking about training and then perhaps the second part being about eating. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, we'll start off with training. We'll kickstart with training.
So what do you think?
Then we can discuss nutrition. My opinion is, 100%. I definitely train less. 100p. I definitely train less given kind of research and evidence that's been kind of put out there. Why? It's a difficult one. Probably because I understand that we don't actually need to train as much as kind of everyone thinks we do in the first place.
Okay,
I remember
so do you want to break that down?
Break it down now, y'all. I remember being I remember being 16 and just hammering body parts in the gym. I must have done at least 30 sets per body part.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny that you bring that up because not the very first coach I had, but the second coach I had, he basically, because I was
not me.
No, it wasn't you. It wasn't you. It was he basically broke down my training because I've always, not always, but I guess in the past 18 months, I've recorded my training, as in I've written it down in a training logbook. And basically, I sent him across all of my training. And it was something along the lines of I was doing 100 reps on my legs each week with really heavy weights, or maybe 100 sets. I don't know. It was something.
It's got to be 100 sets.
It was something ridiculous, ridiculous. I was doing in each, it must have been 100 sets because I was doing I think I was training legs 4 days a week. I was doing walking lunges. I was doing squats. I was doing deadlifts. I was doing single leg press. I was doing leg extension, leg curl. I was doing everything and obliterating my legs. And the funniest part about it was as soon as I switched onto his training program, I then started to make gains. And it was literally like magic, but I pretty much cut my volume down by 3/4. And that was when I started making progress. So I think that is I was training way less hard, but I was making way more gains.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's massive, isn't it? Everyone kind of goes in the gym. Everyone knows the bro kind of split. So you do chest on Monday, back on Tuesday, legs. Well, most bros don't do legs, but anyhow, they'll go back to chest. And then, people just obliterate it. And they kind of it's fine at the start when kind of you're just eating everything. You have no understanding of nutrition, training, anything. And you're probably in a surplus. You're probably young and you're probably recovering at a rate of knots. And so it's kind of, they get away with it at the start, but they probably don't optimize the gains they could be making as a youngster.
Yeah, I agree. I think you see a lot of guys doing this.
Yeah, 100%. And you think of it's a big problem for guys because obviously they want to develop their chest. And then they'll probably do a chest down on Monday, back down on Tuesday, and shoulders. So they're probably pressing north of 50 sets in 3 days. So it's kind of just they're just obliterating their shoulders and kind of setting themselves up for a shoulder injury. So it's definitely something that people need to be made aware of. But it definitely then causes issues the other way as well. And I think you can kind of go into training almost like the bottom end of how much you need to train to make progress or kind of maintain where you're at, especially when the evidence comes into play and you start to learn more about how much volume you need.
I think this is a good point though, kind of when it comes to mindset, because I personally find that I think there's a massive, you need to weigh it up. So it depends what your goal is. Like if your goal is seriously to make gains and you're at a stage where you're feeling like you don't have as much muscle as you would like, then I think that's when you really need to take into account the evidence and you need to be extremely calculated with your training and all that. But then I think there's also kind of like, there's another type of person who's perhaps somebody like me, because at this stage of my life, I would honestly say that I'm happy with the amount of muscle that I have and I'm happy with how my body looks. But I just like to go into the gym and I like to feel like I've worked out. And I think now we have to kind of balance it between, okay, do I want to feel like I've worked out or do I want to make the most gains as possible? Because I know for sure that when I go into the gym and cover the minimum effective dose, and we'll talk about that in a second, but when I go into the gym doing, let's just say, the most efficient and optimal workout for what would get me the most gains as possible, I personally don't feel like I've worked out hard enough and I don't really feel like I've had a very good session. So for somebody who's perhaps in a position like that, what do you think?
It's a difficult one because you've also got to take into, bar enjoyment, you've got to take into things like injury.
Yes, that's a good point.
Burnout and kind of fatigue, so there's factors you need to take into play, and I think it's something you need to start doing when you're an experienced lifter, because you can kind of get a better understanding of like how your body feels, and you can almost self-regulate your training.
So how would you even define an experienced lifter?
How would you define an experienced
Because
lifter?
I don't even think that you or I would be classed as an experienced lifter, because realistically, how long have you been lifting for?
Probably, I reckon I've probably been lifting for 7 years.
Okay, so maybe you are then.
Properly.
Yeah, okay.
3?
Exactly.
4?
So 3 or 4 years, I don't even think that that's an experienced lifter. I wouldn't. Hey?
I wouldn't say that's like, I wouldn't say we're experienced lifters at all. However, or no, I'd say we're experienced lifters in terms of
knowledge,
movement patterns, knowledge. In terms of training age,
yes,
we're not.
Okay.
So I'd say I'm fairly competent in managing my own training in terms of like self-regulating my fatigue. So one day I can come in and feel real good. I can go for a run in the morning and then come in and train and have a good session in the afternoon/evening. Other days I can barely go for a walk. And this isn't
like today because we're jet lagged.
Very, very true. But like today I've managed to literally bosh out 8,000 steps. And there's no way I could train.
No.
Or I could train, but it would just demotivate me because I'd have a rubbish session. I'd go in, I wouldn't hit numbers. So
okay, hang on. Let me just I want to ask you a question here. If you knew less information about evidence, and because basically for anybody who's listening, we landed last night at 2 a.m. We got home at 3, and then James.
That was later than that.
Yeah, we got home at 3:30. We must have been getting to sleep at 4:45, and then James has to basically wake up at, when did you wake up? 5:30?
5:30, yeah.
So you got under 2 hours sleep. And so then basically if you didn't know about evidence and if you didn't know about if you weren't aware of the fact that you don't have to train every day, do you think in the past, let's just take it back 6-7 years to when you were a newbie, would you have trained today?
100%.
Yeah, exactly. This is what I mean, because I am the same. I would have 100% dragged myself to the gym today, despite the fact that I feel so exhausted and run down and just knackered, quite frankly, and my body's in pieces because the plane was so uncomfortable. But I still would have dragged myself to the gym because I would have felt that it was totally necessary to go to the gym. And so I think that this is where evidence is a really good thing, because despite the fact that I find that sometimes I don't feel like I'm having as good of a session due to the evidence, because I don't feel like I'm really burning myself out, as it were. I think, again, it also, there's a positive to it, because it means that I know that it's not going to damage all my progress if I miss a gym session or two, you know, because I can just make up for the volume on another day.
Yeah, I think it's far easier for people like us that train for a kind of overall health and kind of maintaining the body comp we've got. It becomes a little bit harder when people are kind of on a program. So say someone's peaking for a powerlifting competition, it becomes a little bit more difficult. I can understand how people get kind of caught up in it all, because they might be having a day where they've got to hit 85% of a 1 rep max and they miss a session because they landed late. That then puts their program back the next day. They were meant to be at 65%. And I can understand how people get caught up in that. However, for people that are kind of just like into training because they enjoy it, they want to improve their body composition slightly or maintain it. Yeah, I think everyone should be made aware that missing one, even a week, like what really happens in a week? Not a lot, really. There's no real kind of like atrophy of like tissue. It's more kind of, you just look flat. You haven't trained, probably glycogen in the tissue is kind of decreased. So you just look flat, really. You haven't lost any size. I've taken weeks off training.
Yeah, I think a lot of it, again, is in the mindset as well, because you feel like you're out of it and you feel it kind of gets you down a bit, I guess. But then, like, I think if you are aware of the evidence, then I think your mindset's you're able to kind of get through not training, because you know that it's not going to be causing you a lack of progress. Like, it's not going to, what's the word? Atrophying?
Atrophy.
Yeah, it's
atrophy.
But I don't know, atrophying? I don't know how you can turn it into a word like that. But hey, you know what I mean? So I think that's when it kind of becomes a positive thing. But I think overall, in the bigger picture, like when I'm on a proper training program and when I'm following a structure, like some structured training, like I know for sure that I don't train as hard as I would if I was off a training program, just because of the way that it makes you feel. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree with you. And like, for example, here in England, obviously I train out of the place I work out of. It's often cold. It's kind of quiet. And then we've been in Spain. It's been warm. Gym's been busy. And I've had 4 sessions on the bounce that have been fantastic.
Yeah.
Because I've kind of been sweating. I've been feeling as if I'm working.
Mm.
So there's a big, like, it's hard to explain. You've got to try and, I've been there, I've written training programs for myself that are working off purely like kind of
percentages.
And in between my kind of like maximal recoverable volume. And I just don't enjoy it as much. Because I then start to feel like if I drift from the program, my numbers aren't going to be the same. I don't really know whether I'm progressing. And it starts to play in your head and you get a bit confused, and you can kind of then just go completely off track and stop training, stop enjoying it.
Yeah.
So there's a fine line between kind of understanding the evidence in terms of managing fatigue and injury prevention and then enjoying training.
Yeah, no, I agree for sure. By the way, for anybody who's listening to this right now, I would absolutely love it if you could take a screenshot and share it on your Instagram story, tagging both myself at Lauren Tickner and James, which is James_Smith_performance, because we'd love to know what you think about this. Like, it'd be really cool to hear your input and hear about kind of how you train to make sure that you're maximizing both your enjoyment, but also, like, I don't know, what do you prioritize more? Do you prioritize enjoyment, or do you prioritize the science? Because I know that even just 3, 4, 5, 6 months ago, I used to prioritize the science over everything, over my enjoyment. I would drag myself through calculated sessions because I was powerlifting, so I kind of had to, right? But now that I'm off that programming and I'm just basically doing it for enjoyment, for health, I'm getting to the gym when I can, because obviously at the moment my main focus is my business and not my training. And personally, I'm enjoying it way more. And I never thought that I would be someone to say this, because I was so for evidence-based, always. And I never understood why people weren't getting it, but now I get it, and now I can see both sides to it. And so I think that that's been a big thing for me. So yeah, I'd absolutely love to know what it is that you prioritize. So James, just do you want to break down to the listeners what it is that you prioritize, and why?
I think in terms of a business point of view, I prioritize the evidence. I take into account like a client's goals and what they want to achieve, but then I kind of structure their programs in a very evidence-based way, because any kind of person can make someone tired. Like,
Yeah.
anyone could let a client come into the gym, screw them up for an hour, they leave absolutely smashed, puking on the floor.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got to manage a client's expectations in terms of their goals, what they can achieve, and managing their fatigue. Like I've said, like the majority of my clients aren't people that are trainers. They're people with everyday jobs. They go to work, they have a stressful life. So I've got to try and structure their training to offer as much potential as possible in the most optimal way, without kind of negatively impacting their day-to-day life.
Yeah.
But personally, I'm definitely drifting back towards just enjoying training.
Actually, I think the reason why though, James, I think the reason why we're able to, I suppose, get away with just focusing on the enjoyment of training is because we understand fatigue management, and we understand minimum efficient dose, maximum recoverable volume. So do you want to just quickly break down what I did it last time, so it's your turn this time to explain what minimum efficient dose is and maximum recoverable volume, just so that the listeners are able to understand this?
Yeah, well, my version of it is it's a minimum effective dose, and this is kind of the quantity of volume in terms of sets per week per body part that you need to maintain the tissue you have. So this could be kind of, you have to work it out for yourself. In and around kind of the 8 sets is where I work off for myself. But that's 8 sets of direct work per muscle group per week. That literally is nothing. Like, that's 3 sets of bench press, couple of sets of incline press, couple of sets of floor press. That's my training for my chest done, my direct work. And that's kind of how much volume I need to maintain the tissue I have, which is the bottom end of the spectrum. And then you have like kind of maximal recoverable load, volume even, which is the amount of sets that you can recover from each week. That might be between 15 and 20 sets. It will vary like between individuals on genetics, whether people are in a calorie deficit, whether they're in a surplus. And basically the optimal train is obviously as close to your maximal recoverable volume as possible the majority of the time. Mm-hmm. And without getting too complicated, people have even started to kind of overreach their recoverable volume just before a deload week, just to try and increase gains like as much as possible.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're the two kind of spectrums, and working in between kind of the two is what I'd say is optimal for most people.
Yeah.
But if you're trying to maximize gains as much as possible, get up as high as you can towards that recoverable volume and manage how you recover. You have to take it day by day. You can't go, oh, they told me that this works, this is how much I can recover from, and just go and smash it.
Yeah, for sure. No, that's so funny. I was just, I realized I made a mistake when I was saying that. I said like minimum efficient something, but it's because I was like getting confused with this economic theory of like minimum efficient scale.
Oh dear, that's jet lag.
That is literally classic. But I think also another thing to take into account is obviously RPE. Now, I really do work off RPE a lot. Obviously, I focus on kind of making sure that I'm progressing week on week or month on month, but I also do make sure that I'm taking into account RPE, not going to failure on every single set like I used to. I used to go to failure on everything. I was working at an RPE of 10 on every single set. No wonder I wasn't making any progress. But I mean, I just think that's a whole nother part to it, because I used to literally go balls to the wall on every single rep of my training session. I used to do 10 by 10 squats every day that I would train legs. and this was like 3-4 times a week, I'd then go and do tons more volume, like I spoke about before. And so obviously I was training super, super, super hard and always going to this RPE of 10. But now that I'm aware that you shouldn't train to failure, like on your compound lifts and all this stuff, I am just being a bit more sensible with it, I guess. But it's when you realize that you don't need to train to failure on everything, then I think it just allows you to train more smart. And I think that this is what it's all about. It's like training smart, not necessarily training ridiculously hard, but at the same time making sure that you're training hard enough that makes you feel good if that's what you want to achieve. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I agree with you there. It's interesting now that it's recently kind of like started coming out that people have started commenting on training in a commercial gym and watching how many people stop short of failure. And there was a recent study off the top of my head about where they got male lifters to come in and pick a 10 rep max on bench press, what they deem to be a 10 rep max. So mine would be like 40 kilos.
No, it wouldn't.
Cool, there's no laugh there.
40 kilos, that's mine.
By the way, I just wanted to let you know that if you are a fitness coach and you are wanting to accelerate your business and take your fitness coaching business online, then I have a free email training that's going to be perfect for you. So I've left it linked in the show notes because I'm telling you now, for something that is free, it is so valuable. There's people already telling me that it has totally changed their business already and that they've already been able to attract more clients. I will also see if there's a way that I can leave a link to these testimonials as well. If I can't figure it out though, you're just going to have to take my word, but I do leave screenshots of all this stuff on my Instagram story. But anyway, let's get back to today's episode.
But then, yeah, the lifters came in and then they were asked to go to complete failure with what they deemed to be their 10 rep max.
Mm-hmm.
And it was something stupid, like 80% of the lifters cleared their 10 rep max by 9 or more reps.
Mm-hmm.
So you can start to get a little bit complicated when you say, yeah, you should get as close to failure as possible without going to true failure. But I think a lot of people will stop way short of failure, or what they deem to be failure, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Because for me, I guess I've always been one of these people that where I find it hard to get that around my head because I've always, and you know what I'm like I can grind out reps like so easily. Whereas like, I don't understand how other people like can't, but I guess I don't know, I've always trained that way. And I guess again, it comes back to mindset.
Yeah. And I think at the end of the day, you've got to work off what works for you as an individual.
Yeah.
You've got to look at how you recover, how you're feeling, and not just take it. I know a lot of people that take their recovery based off like DOMs and how sore they are. You can't just jump on a foam roll and be like, "What? I'm sore. I'm not training today." Like you need to. It needs to be a bit more work than that.
That just cut out. Say that again.
It needs. I think people need to. You can't, like I said, you can't just jump on a foam roll and be like, "I'm sore. I'm not training." You need to take into a lot of factors when it comes to kind of managing your fatigue, and then you need to work out, right, what am I trying to do? Am I trying to make as many gains as possible? Get up towards your maximum recoverable volume. You got to find it for yourself. It will be in between kind of 12 to 20 sets per body part of direct work. If you're just looking to kind of maintain the tissue you've got and you just want to train as optimal as possible, get down into kind of that minimum effective dose, which will be kind of around, the kind of 8 to 10 sets of direct work per week. What I'd say is work off kind of the middle ground and enjoy training without overcomplicating it.
Yeah, exactly. That's it. It's like not overcomplicating it. If you're serious about making gains, then just make sure that you're applying progressive overload in some way, but also that you are enjoying it. Now, we just need to talk about nutrition and whether or not all the evidence makes you eat worse. Now, obviously, this brings about a whole issue of good versus bad food. And I know, James, you have a lot to say on this, especially considering that you're studying nutrition at university. So what do you think?
God, this could go on for hours. It's an interesting one because I think 100% the evidence obviously points people towards eating more processed foods, especially with how readily available they are, like in supermarkets and whatnot. But I also think there's a lot of like aspect of mindset comes into it. I'm a very big advocate of allowing people to enjoy foods they want to enjoy, whilst focusing on consuming whole kind of single ingredient, micronutrient dense foods. But I think 100% the evidence encourages people to eat worse food and still achieve their goals.
Yeah, I think, again, I mean, how do you define worse food? Well, we all know, let's be real, that, like you just said, single ingredient, whole foods that like come from the earth, that are lean proteins and that haven't been processed and all that stuff. Like, we all know realistically that this food contains a lot of micronutrients and is likely going to be better for us than I don't know, let's just say some salami that has, what are those, do you remember those from school, those like
Pepperonis?
Oh my god, yeah, like let's be real, like a lean pork cutlet is going to be probably better for you than one of those things. But at the same time, if you feel like you're restricting yourself and you're restricting your mind, like that's not going to be good for you either. So I think that the whole eating worse scenario, it's only eating worse if it's becoming all that you're eating. And at the same time, it could actually be better for you than totally restricting and feel like you're cutting everything out, if that makes sense. So the way that we define worse here is going to vary from person to person, because if someone is restricting their calories and they're like literally eating 5 different foods, it's going to be a hell of a lot better for them to start including chocolate and feeling way less deprived than it would for somebody who's like, you know, just fitting in a bunch of crap into their macros just because they can and just because it fits their macros, right?
Yeah. I think a big point that needs to be made before kind of people, this seems to be a very touchy subject for a lot of people, and nutrition kind of becomes a religion.
Yes.
And I think what needs to be said is that almost every single study that looks at overweight, obese individuals, regardless of what foods they consume, if they lose weight, their health markers in their blood improve.
It's so interesting. Yeah.
Regardless of whether someone's consuming sugar, whether they're consuming some saturated fat.
Sugar?
Oh, don't get me started. But I think, yeah, if people were losing weight, exercising more, getting fitter, they are going to improve their health markers. And I think that needs to be the kind of general view, especially with the kind of how the obesity epidemic's continually growing. Rather than focusing on like, you can't eat this, you can't eat that, you can't do this, just lose weight and move a bit more, you will improve your health.
Yeah, and then I think maybe we should do a whole entire episode on tracking macros versus if it fits your macros versus flexible dieting, because I think that's an interesting topic that a lot of people don't really realize that they're not all the exact same thing.
Yeah, I agree. That should be not the next episode. We'll choose one.
We'll do it in the future, so make sure you are subscribed. But I think for now that we've kind of explained the whole thing, I know you've got to go now as well. And I need some dinner, quite frankly. So, yeah, I think it's time to end this.
All right. It's been a pleasure.
I'm not breaking up with you.
Oh, are you sure? I just can't get over your little Rudolph nose. Unfortunately, no one else can see it. I know, I've got a Rudolph nose. But anyway, that is from sunburn, and that's because you didn't get me any sunburn. I offered, but Santander pulled me up for fraud. So yeah, I know. Well, that's not good, is it? But anyway, we'll end this podcast and end this chatter because it was so funny. Actually, a few people, when they shared the episode, because as everybody knows, whenever you share an episode of the Business Meets Fitness podcast, I of course always reply to you because I appreciate it so much. But somebody shared it, and then I sent them a video back, and they were basically like, when James at the end said about how it was time to go to bed, they were like, that is literally me. That is me. I was like, yeah, pretty much. But anyway, thank you so much. It's been time to go to bed for me all day. Yeah, I mean, 2 hours sleep is not good. And that is a good point. I mean, I've done an episode about sleep before, so maybe you should go check that out, James. But
Cool. It's been a pleasure. I hope everybody's enjoyed this episode. Again, we love it when you share. We love it when you tag us. We love doing these episodes. And yeah, it's been cool doing this one today. So we'll see you in the next episode.
Goodbye. Miss you. Goodbye.
Adios, amigos.
Ciao, ciao.